But as a psychologist, how do you account for environmental factors? So this idea that the explosion of certain genres of videos on TikTok and Tumblr and places like that can create an environment where people, based on, say, social fads or something, start to identify a certain way. How do you account for that? Or do you even think that's a phenomenon?
So you're talking about, broadly speaking, what we call contagion in social psychology and clinical psychology. And so, the thing about that is I'm sure it's a real thing because we have lots of data on, eating disorders over history and other kinds of obvious issues, right? And so I'm perfectly willing to say it exists to a very limited degree for trans folks in the same way it exists for other issues. So I don't remember who, I think it was Ross Mansa I was talking to on Twitter, and I love him. He's great. He's great at pushing back on things. And this dude eventually cornered me, and I think I gave an estimate of maybe 5% of young people who are already having the borderline personality, autism spectrum, PTSD, sexual trauma, hate my body thing that people think causes gender dysphoria for some young people. I would say maybe 5% of that population, if that, might be influenced substantially by social contagion. Because if you look at the online little niche groups where everyone's talking about transition and stuff, it's very small groups of people. It's not if there's 3.5 million trans people in the United States, I would seriously be willing to argue that maybe, just maybe, it's 10 or 20,000 kids, if that. If even that. I doubt it's even that. But I would say 5% is the highest estimate I'm willing to agree with, just, again, based upon my clinical experience and the reading of the literature, despite how quality the literature is.
Mm-hmm. But then how do you explain when schools, when you have gender dysphoria suddenly increasing by, magnitude such as 3,000% in a single school? I read about this and that it happened in Sweden, for example. What's going on there?
If that's true, right, in the sense that the data was collected accurately and all those scientific caveats.
Sorry, it's 1,500%. Not 3,000.
That's a lot.
I just looked it up.
Now, the raw number might not be huge, right?
Correct.
It might not be a lot, but that's just a statistical trick, right? So the thing for me is always going to be everything is multivariate, right? And as a geneticist, I'm sure you know that everything is multivariate. There's no such thing as the Mendelian. Except in very rare cases, right? Yeah. But what we're talking about in psychology is always multivariate. Has to be, right? Because there's no single univariate thing that predicts any behavior or any trait of a human psyche, etc. So my thing is that seemingly very large increase in people who are openly identifying, there's probably at least three things happening. So number one, there's probably some greater acceptance or something, or there's social pressure. Number two, there's probably some confusion, and this is the convenient label. Number three, there's probably some contagion. Number four, there's probably some other things going on that I can't necessarily articulate very clearly, but it probably involves some variety of mental health issues, right? So it could be any number of things, but I just, again, not actually being able to work with these people professionally, I can't really say specifically what's happening because we're kind of looking from 30,000 feet. And, my career and my experience is built on the 5 feet away experience,
I really like that. And I think it points to one of the major issues, which is, of course, we mentioned that this is going on in social media and people are going back and forth, but it's actually much more serious than that, right? Because we're also talking about school policy and people trying to change laws and people trying to change the structure of certain institutions. And then also we have actual institutions like the APA, pretty significantly changing things around in order to accommodate a particular perspective on this, which, we just spent the last 20, 25 minutes or so talking about how complicated and nuanced and impossible it is to make concrete statements about. So what do we do here? I mean, it seems like some people are going 100 miles an hour when, everything you've said thus far shows that we shouldn't even be in the car yet.